Welcome, welcome to Jairangam 2020, and thank you for your interest in today's panel discussion, where, along with our panelists, we dwell upon an unknown and an undefined aspect of theater professionalism. I'm Srinivas. I'm an actor and director based in Bangalore. I run a theater organization called Kahevi Dushak Foundation, along with my colleague Ankita, and to share their views on today's topic, we we have our four panelists and very renowned and respected Ms. Neelam and Singh Chowdhry, ma'am. Presently, she's a professor emeritus at the Punjab University. She has a master's degree in the history of art as well as diploma from the National School of Drama, where she set up her own theatre company called The Company in Chandigarh in 1984. Alongside the company, she has also been teaching in the Department of Indian Theatre, Punjab University, and she was also the chairperson. Her well-known plays include Kitchen Katha, The Suit, Yarma, Nagamandala, Bitter Fruit and Naked Voices, Gum Hai, and Black Box, to name a few. Black Box is currently in Book My Show as we speak. Dr. Chaudhary also is the recipient of several awards, including the Sangeet Natak Academy and the prestigious Padma Shri. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We also we also have with us Janab Salim Arif sir, who is an illustrious alumnus of National School of Drama, New Delhi. A very well-known name in the field of Indian theatre and films. He was the head of Department of Cultural Studies in Whistling Woods International, Mumbai. He was also the creative director for Mariam Khan Reporting Live, a popular show on Star Plus channel. His critically acclaimed plays like Aapki Sonia, Kharashein, Humsafar, Ghalib Nama, uh, and uh, all these were showcased in India as well as abroad. Faculty of several prestigious institutions, including National School of Drama in New Delhi, FTII, Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, Kolkata, Academy of Dramatic Arts, Mumbai University, uh, Madhya Pradesh School Drama, Bhopal, National Institute of Fashion Technology, Mumbai, and NID, Ahmedabad. He has received UP Sangeet Natak Academy Award in 2009, Habib Tanveer Rang Samman, Vishwa Hindi Academy's Hindi Seva Samman, and Bharatindu Harishchandra's Hindi Urdu Adab Award for his contribution in theatre. We welcome you, sir. We have with us Mr. Vinay Sharma, a veteran actor, theatre director, writer, and scenographer active in Kolkata theatre since 1981. He is currently the artistic director of Padatik, and as an actor, he has received critical appreciation for leading roles under renowned directors including Shyamanand Jalan, Usha Ganguly, Phyllis Bose, and Anmol Velani, amongst others. His directorial works have toured India and abroad and have been invited to most Indian theatre festivals. His production of Atmakatha, starring Kulbhushan Kharbanda, featured at the 8th Theatre Olympics. From 87 to 2003, he co-created plays for children and Happy Hours, an institution exploring alternative approaches to education. He is also known for his performance art and installations by the artist Chitravanu Mazumdar. We welcome you, Vinay. And along with us, we have Toral Shah, who is the creative producer and production manager at QTP. And recent productions include Every Brilliant Thing, which is brilliant indeed. I've been a witness to it. Wild Track, The God of Carnage, Mother Courage and Her Children. While she has been enthralled by, as she says, the dark side of theatre, she also enjoys her role as one of the driving forces of FESCO, a youth theatre movement that is now in its 22nd year. He has also been instrumental in the building of ambitious international collaborations like The Mirror, Gates to India song Nirbhaya and Maya the musical. However, her first love remains the rehearsal room and the magic of transforming a show from two dimensions to three. We welcome you, Toral. Uh, Dear panelists, so the topic that you see is actually a personal question. Firstly, I apologize if I don't know if this phrase should even be created or used, if it has any relevance to it, called theatre professionalism. But in a country where theatre is a minority art form, its sustenance is extremely crucial, especially for the artists who survive on and for theatre. Where most of the industries, as soon as they enter the growth and maturity phases, they thrive on professionalism. What what does it boil down to for the theatre artists? Again, is this phrase even legit or valid in our country? What does this phrase mean to you, and what is its relevance according to you? It is basically a thought that I had, and I wanted, I if you could share your opinions. Neelam, ma'am, if you could start.
I think the word professionalism um, seems to suggest many things. There can't be a singular explanation of what professionalism and theatre really means. Um, when I joined the National School of Drama, for me, theatre was like a hobby, was seen as a hobby. It is my teacher and the director of the NST, Ibrahim Al Qazi, who instilled in us that professionalism should be perceived in the theatre space with the same kind of way as you would see yourself as a doctor or a lawyer. Because both the training, the rigor, the labor that goes into training yourself to be a lawyer or a doctor is the same kind of labor and intellectual rigor you need to be in theatre. But professionalism also seems to suggest, in a certain way, how you monetize what you do. I think there is a lacuna there in theatre. Most of us who are working in a particular way, which would be not considered a certain kind of theatre, which brings in the audience, brings in the money, do not know how to dovetail professionalism with the work that we do. The attitude is professional, which means that we believe in discipline, focus, hard work, a certain kind of commitment, dedication. But perhaps as the word professionalism seems to suggest, a monetization of all these dimensions, they may not really exist. So we do say theatre is what we do professionally, but is it uh, is it through which we earn a livelihood is a big question mark.
True, true. And the other day when we were talking, and when I kind of briefed about this with Toral, Toral had great insights on this. Um, Toral, how would you like to take it forward from here?
Um, I have to totally agree with Neelam ji that we see artists and creators and theater makers coming in with the utmost professional attitude and approach, the rigor that goes into putting a show together, a production together. Um, but I mean, for somebody who's grown up living and practicing mainly in Bombay and then in Delhi, Bangalore, and other cities, and primarily uh, creating works in English language. What we often tend to do is look at it by the Western barometer, which I think doesn't apply to India at all. So, like when we are doing productions for which we have to get licenses, like say from a Samuel French or somebody like that, they insist that we should say that this is an amateur production. I mean, you could have like really senior actors and directors, doing a production in India, but the way they define it is do these actors belong to the actors union, to the actors guild, the producers guild, the actors equity, and only if you're registered with some such organization, are they considered to be professional productions, right? So there is, there is a huge difference between how what works in India and the rest of the world. And then I think even within India, there are so many realities, right? Which, everyone agrees that we can't look at theatre professionalism as a singular term. Um, because of the plurality of theatres that are practiced in the country, there are that many, different ways to look at it. The other thing which I think Neelam Mansingh really, I think, hit the nail on the head was um, about the commercial aspect of it, right? So I would like to say that, I became a theatre professional when it became my primary source of, earning money or livelihood. If this is what I'm doing and this is what is paying my bills and I'm able to support myself, um, so those are two completely different ways of. There are three things. One is the output, whether this was a professional production, are they professional actors, or was it amateurish, the quality of the production. Second is the attitude, which we heard about, that everybody comes in it with a really professional attitude. And the third is it making a living for the theater makers. So I think that it probably needs to be looked at, at all three levels. I think the attitude in most cases that I've come across, like more than a majority, is professional. So then then it boils down to what the community and the industry perceives as professional versus what an audience receiving it might look at it as.
True, true. So, okay, this leads me to another perspective, which I would like to hear from Salim ji. Salim ji, you have been immensely involved in both films as well, or TV as well as theater. Does and I'm pretty sure you have different meanings to the professionalism when we talk of both of it. How is it? How much is it different vis-a-vis films and TV?
You see, incidentally, the term professional, as we know, would be Neelam ji, I think, has set the template pretty well on that issue. But addressing yours, comparing the mediums, all three have different ways of looking at it and they work differently. But the fact remains that since I was working in television and films, and I still do some of that work, I can do theatre. So the only reason I can do theatre in Hindi and do it over a period of 20-25 years is because I've survived on other sources for my livelihood, which I think applies to most of us. Uh, it's a matter of attitude, honestly speaking. And television is pretty professional now. Apart from stars in films, where discipline takes a toss because the economy revolves around them, the rest of our industry is pretty professional in terms of work. If you go down south, I think they are next to the Indian Army. Our film units would be the most professional outfits I have seen at work. And same with our theatre personnel. So when it comes to human resource, I think we have the best. But it's just that we have been let down, and I from our collective when it comes to professionalism, because there are certain issues which have not been addressed so far. Is that the status of theatre hasn't improved, in spite of the volume improving. Now that's a collective question one needs to address. For instance, I've been refusing to send my play for Jairangam for the simple fact that the director will get an airfare, rest of this actors will come by 3-tier sleeper or whatever. Now, when the premier institute of the country, which was supposed to lay the standards of professional theatre activity, shortchanges you and treats you not worthy of being even a AC train travel because you number 30 or 40 and you create enormous amount of resource to showcase plays of the country, which most of the time are not the best representation of the work that has happened. So, so I'm saying there has been a very strange paradox because you take in students in all departments of, and I travel to most of them. Most of the theatre courses in the country are run on this false premise of creating a professional theatre base. But we know for sure that nothing like that exists in Hindi, yet we train them for Hindi. And even if you go to NSD rep, you can work for 5 or 7 years max. So you end up being character actors in Mumbai, and now hopefully things are being shot in other places. But you become a side character, third from the left, fourth from the right. So in spite of having a great professional attitude, I used to feel pain to see someone like Manohar Bhai being treated the way he was in Mumbai. I was really, I was embarrassed because when he was the rep chief, we used to hide here and there when he used to walk across Mandi House. That kind of aura we had for him. And in Mumbai, he was like any other character. So I'm just trying to tell you that this whole notion of professionalism, in terms of attitude of workers, is fine. But with as far as the other parameters are concerned, I think there is a serious, in the last 30 years, we have undone a lot of things in the name of creating and extending the activity of theatre. Like theatre would be the most disorganized economical activity in the country. But
Exactly.
there is
Right. That, yes.
there is a certain economy at work there, and we have managed to work, Neelamji, all of us, for the last 20-25 years. Toral and I know Kwasar, to spend their entire year planning for the festival and the kind of sponsorship they have to work for. So it's a huge task, but fortunately they have streamlined, which is a good thing. So TESPO is quite streamlined compared to people like us who are like on a very, after a point, a very ad hoc basis. We don't have an annual plan. We do not have a, we'll do, because it all depends on the kind of dates you get or the kind of shows you get. So we do not even have, you will not know, you should know that from 1964, there has been no scheme to create new theatre spaces in the country. Tagore Centenary was the one when all these Tagore theatres were made, and they have been constantly upgraded. We are working with the infrastructure of 70s in most of the cities, with improved light and new dimmers and things like that. But we haven't increased the number of auditoriums. In terms, our railway stations have changed, our airports have changed, or our performing spaces have remained. Kamani still remains the number one auditorium in Mumbai. When we started, it was number one. Till today, that's the auditorium you go to. So in 40 years, where have we gone? I'm saying, so professionalism of the worker is fine. But these workers, when they sit together and create policies, really undermine theatre, because now nobody has really thought of upgrading the theatre fraternity, which is where my basic, not anger, but my basic grudge is. So
Right.
when we talk of professionalism, I think, and also before I conclude, the basic dishonesty of theatre worker is also, and when I say basic dishonesty, I know very important actors and directors who do not want to pay royalty to writers. They are very happy paying the sweeper of the theatre a tip of 500 rupees. But when it comes to giving royalties, they say we haven't made any money out of it. So when you have, or they'll change names and use another somebody else's translation and give it their name. Those kind of things have happened, and I know for sure it has. So in a medium, when you have this kind of range of, I would say, human behavior. And so there is, I think, a lot needs to be done on that.
Thank you. Vinay sir?
Yes. No, there is little to not agree with in whatever we have heard so far, but I would like to just probably make a couple of uh, distinctions, if not differences. One is, I think, for the scope of our discussion, uh, I think we should just take it for granted that we have to separate the professional theatre from the commercial theatre, because we are talking
Of
of two
course.
separate things, really. If you want to restrict it to professionalism, commercialism, I think, is a separate baby altogether, and we can talk about it later, perhaps. But if you're only talking about professionalism, I think, from my experience at least, and I think all of us will have different experiences depending on where we work, how we have learned our trade, and then how we've disseminated whatever we have learned. So, from that point of view, working at Padatik, because that's where I have been since the beginning, I think I found myself in a very privileged position, because there was a space out of which we could operate. And later on, within 15 years or so of my being there, Shamananji himself decided that we would not go out and hire theaters. And in fact, we would try and do what he called theater without tears, by just performing in our small studio theaters at Atik itself. So that was a huge privilege, and it was therefore that privileged ground that I've operated in, and where it was perhaps therefore easier to inculcate and to insist on professionalism vis-a-vis discipline, vis-a-vis the output that we were doing, without having to over bother about the fact कि यार आज हाउसफुल होगा कि नहीं, या जितना खर्चा हुआ है वो पैसे वापस आएंगे कि नहीं. This basic elemental question is done away with the moment you choose to work in a space where people have to come to you if they want to see your theater, and where, in fact, Shamananji also insisted that tickets would be free for the first 5 or 10 years that we operated, because he said people should come in, and a certain habit which was dying out during the late 90s and early 2000s, that habit has to continue. And I suppose one should also mention this culture, which in fact exists more in the theatre fraternity, and which is abysmal, of saying, यार तो पास भेज रहे हो क्या? I think it's disgusting when people in the theater ask you, I mean, that they're not interested in paying that, whether it's 100 rupees, whether it's a 500 rupee ticket, or whatever it is. And I think if we talk of professionalism, the first change that has to come about is in this attitude. अगर हम एक दूसरे को विद इन द थिएटर फ्रेटर्निटी इस तरह से, अगर हम, मतलब, क्योंकि हमें ऑडियंस चाहिए या हम चाहते हैं कि कोई देखे, I think the stalwarts, in fact, should have insisted with their group members that if you are going somewhere, pay. And I must here share something. If there is a play happening at Padatik, and if I want to see that play, I buy a ticket. And it is incumbent on all the actors at Padatik, or anybody we know, that they must come in and buy a ticket. And even if it means that we do not get certain audiences who we would love should see our theater, we have stopped sending complimentaries to people. And इसमें मेरा सिर्फ एक ही कहना है सबके साथ कि if you believe in what you're doing, and if you believe that it is professional theater, as in professionally good enough, लोग आएंगे, आज नहीं आएंगे, कल नहीं आएंगे, और अगर कल नहीं आए, कभी भी नहीं आए, तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? My point is, if you're doing excellent work, it's their loss, not your loss. So this is a different experience that one can talk about vis-a-vis professionalism. But I would also like to perhaps say that the point that Toral made about India being different from the rest of the world in this distinction is perhaps not true entirely, because I think whether it's the US, whether it's the UK, a lot of government funding supports the theatre. And when there are cuts in government funding over there, the same kind of outcry is heard there that we hear in our country. So that similarity, I think, must be recognized. And yes, in our country, we've been always doing what I would like to call two-boat theatre, because everyone has one foot in one boat and one in another. So that's okay. But there is something which also, therefore, has happened in our country, which is wonderful, that we do a theatre which is often beyond professionalism, which is devotionalism, I would say, or which is activism, or which is purely obsessionism. But it makes you, in fact, strive to be more than merely professional. The element of excellence in what you're doing is also something that I have personally experienced in actors over the years since 1981, when I joined Padatik, till now. Yes, it has changed. And as I was telling you, Srinivas, the other day, it has changed perhaps because I can only say that it's because the nature of permanence seems to have changed in these 30, 35 years. Yesterday, doing something permanently meant doing it for life. Today, it seems doing something permanently means if you've done it for 2 years, that's very permanent. It's a long time. And I think it's something we just need to recognize and accept. So
Absolutely.
these differences to go on with.
Correct. So I was in fact coming to that, the nature of permanence. So on that note, Toral, congratulations on this basis. Having 22 years doing PESPO, then you have established, you've defined the nature of permanence to a next level. But uh, so when you say it is beyond professionalism and it is about devotionalism, uh, no issues with that. But what we see is, again, if you realize, I've mentioned as when most of the industries, they enter the growth and then they look for this particular thing called professionalism, because that is what drives them to exist, survive, grow. Something which I feel is lacking in our fraternity. First of all, to call our theater as an industry in India, I'm not sure. I don't think we can still call it like that. So, what is that? How do we create that need to show that yes, we exist in the first place? Survival growth will come after that. I'm not sure even if we can talk about, or say that yes, we do exist. Like one institution like NSD cannot define our existence in the country, because there's hardly anything that has been done, and this is being told by the ones who have already studied there, worked there. Yes, they have their own limitations, but how do we exist? How do we create our existence? Um, uh, Neelam, ma'am?
These are very complex issues because there is also regionalism. There is also the place where you work. Like,
Correct.
for example, when you work in Bombay, there's a different kind of energy that the city provides you.
Very
When you work,
valid.
when you work in a place like Chandigarh and you do Punjabi theatre or regional theatre, you are already diminishing your so-called. I mean, it's not that you're jostling for space, in the national framework, but nevertheless, how is your presence recognized or is not invisibilized? Um,
Right.
these are not conscious thoughts that come within you, but these are nevertheless a reality of the way you work.
True.
We have no
True.
infrastructure. There's
Hmm.
absolutely no infrastructure. When I do a play in my backyard, I do have a studio like Padatik. It's really a rehearsal space where when I did Black Box as a play, which was created during the pandemic, I did have 10 shows. It can seat about 40 people, but I didn't have more than 12 people. It was sterilized, the windows were open, people had to wear masks. So we tried to adhere to certain uh,
Norms.
norms which are necessary today. So I don't have I have a rehearsal space rather than a performance space in the conventional sense. But there's no infrastructure. The only thing is I have a space. I have a grant by the Ministry of Culture. Now the grant is 6,000 rupees per actor. The ministry has no idea how the dynamics in theatre work. I have a group which has been with me for 32 years. I also have a group which has been with me for 6 years. So there's a younger group and there's a more, nearer to my age group. So which are functioning both simultaneously.
Hmm.
Uh, Nobody's going to come for 6,000 rupees a month. And yet the government has put so many stringent um, checks and balances on that 6,000 that it is going to, you have to give the names of the actors, then it goes directly to that actor's bank account. Actors leave, they go off for more richer pastures. Sometimes they can't be with you for whatever reasons. There's so many there's so many unknown factors in this whole equation between a director and a group that you work with and the
True.
government grants that sometimes you wonder if it's even worth uh, all that paperwork and all that headache and a spurious notion that you get a grant that can make you uh, make you continue your work.
Hmm.
Also, I mean, I've been working in the theatre since 1984, 85, but I don't think my situation is any different from somebody who's starting off, despite
Right.
having put so many years in it. Yes, I agree with you. One NST cannot feed the whole nation. There are many other institutions that have also come up. It's not that the NST, it's just that the NST being the fountainhead we seem to put too many eggs into that basket.
Hmm.
After all, you have it in Trishur, you have it in Pondicherry, you have it in Bangalore, you have it in Varanasi now. So there are many smaller versions of the NST that have come up, more
Right.
regional, more local, more vernacular, and you have some which have come through the aspirations of the state. Um, but the NST, because it became the template, did naturally resonate in whatever structures came up
Hmm.
after that. I taught at the drama department at the university till I retired in 2016, I think. So I was working there for many years. Um, it's really the fact that we don't seem to have, we don't, I don't know, there is something, it is as Vinay very rightly said, it has to do with madness, it has to do with dedication, it has to do with your own sense of being in that space, because that is the space that makes you feel alive. That is the
Right.
space to define yourself. That is the space which helps you take decisions. That is the space which makes you makes you articulate all the uncertainties that you face in daily life. That is the place which gives you a sense of what it means to be, everything on the stage is lies, your lover is not your lover, your child is not your child, uh, the window is not making you see a beautiful cherry tree. But
Right.
it is more truthful than life itself. It is
Correct.
imperative that the actor, whatever he does, is dealing with that which is true. So there are so many contradictions inbuilt into the profession itself. But yet it is a hard choice to make, to stay on, especially when you're doing regional theatre, working in a city which gives you no support, zero support, and yet you want to. I mean, I've always felt right from the beginning. Whether I have to pay for the sets or costumes is not the point. I must pay the actors decently.
Yes.
So that has been my main uh, uh, conceptual, attitudinal, economic uh, um, rule, which
Right.
has kept my group together. But yet, it's very hard. It is, and you don't get shows. As Salim said, you can't plan. There's no calendar of events. You don't know if anyone will call you, and you don't even know if the people that call you will actually. It will fructify. You get messages, but it doesn't sometimes happen. And yes, I agree that the NST has to set the formula. You pay the director, and you don't. I remember the last time when I went with one of my plays, Gum Hai, one of the actors, the one who was assisting me, had to come from Bombay. Previously, they always paid for people who are Sangeet Natak Academy awardees or whatever their criteria is. Um, but they this time refused to pay the other actor, my co-director or assistant director, his ticket from Bombay. So I said, anyway, you come, I'll pay for it. So I mean, I don't know, you don't earn anything, and yes,
Yes.
you have to earn elsewhere. It's because I taught at the university, I had a certain financial regularity. Theatre never gave me that, in spite of being in it for so many years. I
Exactly.
hope I'm not overspoken.
No, no, absolutely not. They were highly insightful. Thank you, sir. Salim, sir, how do we cope up with it? And our SA people is also one of the groups that you've been working on. So, and with 30, 40, you've just gone to Lucknow in this situation with 30, 40 people. How,
Yeah.
how do you cope up? Yes,
See, but I do not have
right.
what you call a group. It's a platform. So whatever content I choose, I invite friends who have the first right of refusal. So Atul Kulkarni, Yashpal Sharma, Anup Soni, they've all worked with me in their early days. So Kharashe happened because of them. They came together for that show. Whenever we have to do it, we reassemble and do it. Yashpal will come for the other two shows I've done with him. Harsh Chaya will come for another play which I have done. Amit Bahel and Bakul Thakkar will come for the fourth play which I have done. Zishan Ayub and Swanan will come for some that Chakkar Ganchakkar which was later. So I'm saying it's a very different way of working as far as I'm concerned because I can't afford to have a group honestly speaking, and second I encourage all my actors to go out and make money. I tell them first you have come to Mumbai, so don't come to me because you want to do theatre because you are not getting work in films and television right now. First go and get work there. If you manage there, then come and do theatre if you can. So for me, it's a very different because theatre is a commitment. And I know so many actors who come to me and very well known ones, and they say our only problem is we can't commit a confirmed date for a show because if something happens in my shooting, then I'll prefer to shoot. So I understand that.
Mm.
But what we do is we whatever dates I say 3 to 4 times in a year max is what we get it to perform at Prithvi for 2 days, 1 day, whatever. And then some other shows which we get invited to. So the money we make from invited shows is distributed with the actors. So the entire team is paid for. And Mumbai also, whatever little we can pay, we pay in terms of travel or whatever. Because end of the day, for a 200 capacity auditorium, even if you make a full house, your rental and advertising will take care of about your 70% of the gate money.
Mm.
And at times, the refreshments and food we have to personally pay. So that's okay.
Right.
But that madness, that passion, whatever you want to call it, we keep doing that. And also, because of a period of 20-25 years, there are times when you get invited to do shows outside of Mumbai, where you make a little money. But we work slightly differently because our first insistence is that I need these basic facilities. So I need air travel for my film and TV actors, and I need proper hotel stay, and then I say what money can you. So it's a very different kind of a deal. For the actors, it's a kind of picnic which they enjoy for 3 days. The team for a North Indian show of this 40 actor play which I have a team of about 30 musicians, dancers, singers coming in from Agra, which I've trained and I've kept ready there for my North Indian shows. So I don't have to travel from Mumbai with all my
Right.
team. So Patna, Banaras, we have performed Pasa because of that. And of course, we don't make money. When I said we don't make money, whatever we get, we just split. So everyone gets paid, and we try to pay as much as we can to the actors because, and also the backstage workers. So everyone is staying together, eating together. That kind of thing is there. There's no star system as such. So
Right.
all that we try to. But the fact remains, as Neelamji was saying, and yet, I don't know when my next show is going to happen. Which is in case of Padatik, and Neelamji has a small space, Padatik has a small space. Toral and Kwasar have an annual calendar which is worked out with colleges and all that. They also struggle a lot. But Prithvi and NCB have kind of worked out things with them, and they are much more professional than most of us when it comes to planning. So I really admire the way they run their program because there's something which we can learn from HESCO as far as planning and execution is concerned. But we being single people platforms, so me and
Right.
Lubna, we kind of put it together and then friends come in and we perform it. But the basic idea of sharing, I think, keeps the whole thing going. So the fact that they all come back and perform for us 20 years later, for Karachi happened in 2002. And Atul and Yashpal find time to come and perform even today, which is, I think, I'm very, very blessed and grateful to them for this.
Exactly. Here I see Neelam Mansingham has an approach. You have an approach. Uh, so and which is a learning for us who are starting in new or dwelling in new. And that is because you have been in this for so many years. So you as an individual or you as a group have found a way to survive. Uh, that has happened again, and which is why can we also say that nobody really knows if there is a common way or if there is a common platform which probably helps us in knowing that okay, जिसके इसके वजह से हम कह सकते हैं कि ये industry है. So we are like Neelam ma'am said that there is regionalism, and that's why you say Mumbai, like a person in Bangalore sitting. If I look at Mumbai, I don't look at Mumbai. I aspire for Mumbai because there is I see professionalism over there. But the moment I look somewhere else, again that's something which I'm not able to. So we are
But
there in pockets, but we're not there throughout. Sorry, were you saying something, sir?
no, I'm just saying that as Toral right at the beginning said, it's difficult to standardize things in India. Marathi theatre has its own way of functioning, which is pretty well organized with the producers and rest of everything in place. So they have a system which is going on. Uh,
Right,
Gujarati has a system, and they are commercial and professional production. So they have their own way of dealing with it. Problem comes only with most of the time with Hindi because Hindi film and television work was happening in Mumbai. So one had to migrate. Now with the labs going out of the equation,
hmm,
the print, the cellulite going out of equation,
hmm,
well, it's quite possible that Hindi films and television will increase happening in other cities and theatre workers will perform in plays like they do in rest of the world. It's only,
right,
this was a unique creation only in India as far as the Hindi film industry and television was concerned. Had it been
correct,
the center been in Delhi and Allahabad, we would have all been happily doing all three, four mediums. So, and a certain kind of professionalism would have evolved,
Right.
because what we call professionalism, there, as Vinay ji was saying, there is a commercial side to it and there is an attitudinal professional side to it. There is this whole devotional aspect, commitment to what you are doing, commitment to excellence, commitment to finding your own voice, commitment to finding your own idea of truth and things like that. So there is a certain individual, I would say, responsibility on oneself to continue with what you're doing. But in the larger context, when you say, is there a solution? I think there have been trials and errors, but there have been very serious, personally, if you ask me, in the last 30, 40 years, we have allowed things to get as far as the mainstream. In Hindi, we never tried to create a mainstream theatre,
Right.
which is the case in Gujarati and Marathi. Had Hindi, and the mainstream directors we had, we kind of never recognized them that big. So रणजीत कपूर भाई का काम इतना बड़ा है, पर नेमीचंद जैन जी ने कभी उनको खुल के तारीफ नहीं, या हिंदी के मेन स्ट्रीम लोगों ने उनको सीरियसली नहीं लिया बिकॉज बहुत पॉपुलर थे. तो वो प्रोफाउंड होने का जो हिंदी थिएटर पर एक जोर पड़ा है, इंटेलेक्चुअली आपका कविता और उसका पोइट्री की एस्थेटिक्स हम थिएटर में लागू करके एनालाइज करते रहे हैं, प्लेज एंड ऑल दैट. So that has somewhere set the template in a very different zone as far as the officially recognized theatre of the country is concerned. Because what happens in NSD and around is one theatre. Exactly. What happened in rest of the India is completely different. And what Mumbai, fortunately, because of television and film, now you have 80% of NSD talent coming back on stage, which is creating new audiences, which is creating a new synergy. So Manav Paul is not from NSD, but he does work. Kumud Mishra, Sanjay, all these guys who are finding, and Nasir Bhai was doing it all these years. Correct. So is Pankaj also, why felt the urge to come back. Govindji also wants to come. So there is a lot of these Imanis dying to come on stage and do something. So this whole idea of coming back to theatre after you are settled in films has somewhere also helped the cause of Hindi theatre in the larger, I would say, interest of theatre. So. But, you know, I don't want to talk too much about NSD and issues there, because we all know them. And the government grant system, I know, they are very happy to patronize theatre workers who go to them with grants, for grants. आप इंडिपेंडेंट आप मैनेज कर रहे हैं, तो आप मेन स्ट्रीम आपके उस थिएटर का हिस्से नहीं. जैसे मैं उस थिएटर का हिस्सा नहीं हूँ, आप उस थिएटर का नहीं हिस्सा. एग्जैक्टली, मैं उसका हिस्सा नहीं हूँ, और मुझे उससे अलग भी रखा जाता है. बिकॉज हमारा काम मान लिया जाता है, ये तो फिल्म वालों के साथ काम करता है या टीवी के एक्टर के साथ काम करता है, तो मेरा थिएटर सीरियस नहीं माना जाता है दिल्ली के सर्कल से. मेरे टिकट पे मेरे वहाँ कमानी में फेस्टिवल होता, मेरे प्लेस का 4,000 रुपए का टिकट होता, तो सब वो बना. और मैं उनसे कहता हूँ, आप अंग्रेजी प्लेस देख सकते हो कीमत का टिकट लेके, हिंदी प्ले क्यों नहीं देख सकते. तो उस तरह की बातें होती हैं, मगर आई हैव नो इश्यूज विद दैट. हिस्टोरी जो बनता है वो करता है थिएटर पे, एंड आई रिस्पेक्ट ऑल ऑफ देम हु आर वर्किंग इन थिएटर. बट द फैक्ट रिमेन्स दैट collectively we have not really addressed basic issues of theatre even till today. Al-Qazi Sahab was the only one who brought in a certain sense of discipline and a professional attitude to presenting of a play. मतलब अशर कैसे मूव करेगा NSD में, जो मैं मोटी सी मिसाल दे रहा हूँ. अलकाजी साहब के टाइम में जो सेट का स्टैंडर्ड होता था, जो एस्थेटिक्स का स्टैंडर्ड होता था, जो फिनिश का एक प्रोडक्शन का, एक पॉलिश्ड प्रोडक्शन की जो एक फील आती थी, अब हमारे यहाँ प्रोडक्शन में NSD में नहीं नजर आता. रिपर्टरी कंपनी यूज्ड टू ल्योर अस इनटू थिएटर. उनके प्रोडक्शंस देख के हम नेशनल स्कूल ऑफ ड्रामा ज्वाइन करने के लिए एक्साइटेड हुए. नाउ नथिंग इंस्पायर्स यू ऑफ NSD rep to really think of joining an institution. So I'm saying जो थिएटर हमने उस वक्त देख लिया, जो काम देख लिया 70s में, आज भी हमारे यहाँ 70s में ही अटके हुए हैं हम सब।
जी।
और आज भी सेमिनार होता है तो वो आखिरी डायरेक्टर जब्बार पटेल होते हैं जिनको बुलाया जाता है। बाकी हम लोग तो एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करते 30 साल के बावजूद, and we are not part of that history. So that's okay. But the fact remains that this individual effort
Right.
has sustained theatre in its own way,
Correct.
much more than the officially granted Delhi centric theatre.
No, undoubtedly, because that leads me to the two persons whom I look up to, Toral and Vinay. When I was in Jamshedpur, I always aspired to, be in Padatik at one time. And after coming to Bangalore, I've known of QTP, Tesco, and eventually been following your works. So individually, how have, you know, I won't say sustained. I think you really grew, and that's why people look up to you also. How do you do that, Toral?
Um, um, okay, so first up, I mean, for me, I think that theatre in this country right now is really thriving, right? Like, despite all the odds, all the challenges that all of us are aware of, and I mean, at any given evening, if three theatre people meet, you'll find them talking about all the problems that we are facing. I really think that we are at a which is uh, which is not only surviving, it is thriving. And there are a couple of factors which have led to this. So one of the things that we have noticed, at least in most of the metro cities in the last 10 years, is is the birth of many smaller independent alternate venues, right? Where you can perform and you can share and you can experiment and you can try things out. This is not just something that is unique to Bombay. There are venues that are coming up and labs which are coming up in Pune, in Bangalore, in Delhi, like everywhere, even in Ahmedabad and Baroda, where people can now go and at least explore what it is that inspires them, what they are passionate about, right? Like this obsession and all that we're talking about is a real passion for the theater art form, which keeps us, which draws us here and then keeps us here, right? It's like a calling for everybody who's in the theater, right? So there is there is a divinity in the way we feel
Absolutely.
drawn to this art form. Um, so one is that all these spaces have come up. And therefore, there has been a certain democratization of the art form where people can independently showcase their work. Okay, I'm not sitting in judgment at all of the quality of the work or what language it is in, what is the form. But the fact that you had an idea, you got a group of people together, you rehearsed for a couple of months or 6 months, and then you had a platform where you could present it to a ticket buying audience, right? So there is more and more of that happening. Which I think is incredible. Like at least in Bombay, like I know the people who are starting out all these venues, right? Like say a Harkat, or even in Bangalore, like Shunya and um all these other venues like the Courtyard Hall that have come up is by individual effort. So the individual effort is no longer in just putting a company of actors together. The individual effort is also now going into people starting their own venues and giving that platform. Um, the second thing which this year we have witnessed is in the digital space, right? So you didn't even need the physical venues. And if you just go to, I mean, at least where I go to look for events is on Book My Show and Insider.in, and the incredible number of creative ventures that are happening. It's just incredible. There are so many storytelling events, plays that are happening, digital plays or recordings of plays, and this has further made the doing of theatre accessible, right? So there are more and more people now in the industry. Um, referring to what Salim ji was saying earlier and the other panelists, the reason I think it is thriving, it's because of the community. I think, I mean, personally, I have been so incredibly fortunate and privileged to have the support of the theatre community, which has helped us come to this point. Like if TESPA has reached its 22nd edition, next week, it's only because of the theatre community support. Whether it is in terms of giving time to mentor the young theatre makers, to take workshops, to come and give feedback to rehearsal sessions, or now in this will be our 11th year that we have gone crowdfunded. They have also, 1,000 है, 2,000 है, जितना भी हो सकता है, right? Or even if it's 500 rupees, people have given in order for TESPO to go on. And it is from the community. It's not just the community of theatre makers, it's also the audiences, right? If there is somebody who's come and watched a play which has made them, look at their life differently or given them an insight into something, you've converted them into a theatre lover. That one evening of theatre is a lifetime membership, kind of thing that you can get from an audience member. And it is these people who have all banded together in order to make these a lot of these initiatives keep going. I mean, I remember there was a time when on Wishberry, Keto, all, I think Prashant and all from Crow and Foise and all of them, they sourced their funding from audiences. And this is nothing new. I mean, like Vinay ji was saying, this is like a global phenomenon. Many artistic ventures are looking towards crowdfunding and, sourcing whatever the basic capital they need to start off their projects.
Right.
So, I mean, for me, I think it's a really exciting time. Like I'm incredibly optimistic about where we are going and how we are going about it. There is a certain, I will say this, that being in Bombay and practicing mainly in English theatre, there is a certain divorce, not a certain divorce, but there is a certain detachment from government initiatives that we have grown up with. Right? We
Right.
haven't really engaged at a policy level. We haven't engaged at what are the grants, what are the subsidies, how one can work with the state and with the government to enable that. There has been a certain independence that we've grown up with, and you'll see that in a lot of people from Bombay. There's this little chip on our shoulder about having made it on our own kind of thing. And I apologize for that attitude. But I think it is really, I mean, I think it is something that I personally need to look at, is how we can engage in order to then enable change at a much larger scale, right? Like individuals
Right.
can only, the impact of an individual's efforts is so like in the immediate vicinity. But it's only by coming together and working with the state apparatus that we can have greater change happen. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I just want to say I'm very happy with the state of things because I see them growing
Right.
and not stagnating.
Right. And it's so interesting the way you put it when you say we both have been working independently, the government versus us. What the way I see it as both of you don't exist for each other, but
Yeah, that's the way of looking at it. Sure.
yeah,
No, in a way that's
Yeah.
true. In Mumbai, that's true.
exactly.
We are not part of the government sector, so we have
Yeah.
found ways to deal
And
with it.
Bangalore has actually silently, I don't know, directly or invariably, has followed or is still following the footsteps of Bombay, and because like I said, most of them again look up to that. कि भाई कैसे हो रहा है? The community that you're talking about, how this entire community itself is helping in evolving theatre, not just quantitatively but more importantly qualitatively. And then you have Pondicherry and the likes of Hyderabad and Chennai on the other side, who are also thriving, and that's somehow, being an inspiration for us. And also, when you talk about places like Harkat, the intimate spaces, I've been to Padatik and I was in awe by the sheer lights that are placed in Padatik, an intimate space which carries so many power lights, profiles, fresnels, you name it and you have it. And I was telling Vanessa that this is a prime example of an intimate space where you keep audience wherever you want it, and without having to compromise on the lights, which are kind of the life of theater. So it is a little bit about how you've been managing Patate. Briefly before I go to my just last question.
No, I think the management at Padatik really has continued more or less in the same way as it used to, except a couple of changes that I've pointed out. That we stopped doing free theater, therefore you had to earn. And the other basic thing that one has done, again adapting to the way that one has to one's own particular circumstances, was that I've laid down a rule that each play must be treated as a profit center. It's as simple as that. So
Right.
you could, you have to make a play break even, period.
Right.
Now, whoever needs to do a play has to find a way of ensuring that. And that way could be different for different productions or different directors or different actors. And
Mm-hmm.
I am now beginning to insist on an exercise, even for what I do, that you have to work out how much you want to spend on a play and ensure कि एक पैसा कमाओ भले, लेकिन एक पैसा कमाओ उससे. और अलग अलग लोग अलग अलग तरीके खोजें उसमें. So you'll be surprised to know that the budget for one of the most, I would say, widely performed plays at Padatik in the last 15, 16 years, which was a play that I did, and I spoke to you about it, Srinivas. The budget for that play was 1,392 rupees, the production budget. So prior to that, uh, doing a play meant that you had to spend in the thousands. It
Right.
was, I mean, it was taken for granted कि यार इतना खर्चा तो होगा ही. My
Correct.
point is that you should not limit your imagination in either way, whether it is at the lower end of the spectrum or whether it is in spending 10 lakhs. That is not the consideration. It is not about whether you can pay an actor 1 rupee or whether you can pay an actor 10,000 or 50,000 for a play. The point is, how will you justify it? How
Right.
are you going to recover it? Because this is not a time anymore where we can afford to be woolly headed about
Right.
the nitty gritty of the theater.
Mm.
As we
Mm.
have discussed within the session itself, that it's not only about NSD, not only about governmental funding, because the future may be thriving, as Toral said, or it may be bleak, as I often feel. So we have to be ready, yes, to be completely independent financially and try and find ways to stand on our feet. And the way to do that is either to go very big or to go very small. Remaining
Yeah.
in between is the death knell.
Right, right. And how interesting when I hear as thriving from one of the panelists and as bleak. I'm not saying it is, but here I recall of Neelam ma'am's word of regionalism, how it impacts the notion also. Which brings me to the last question, panelists, which is also like a takeaway for me and the viewers of this discussion is what is my responsibility as an artist in my practice towards colleagues and the audience with the experience that you've garnered. uh, what is your say so that wherever you are looking forward to, your future is something which I would want you to share in terms of what would be my responsibility as an artist towards my colleagues and audience in practicing theater. Neelam ma'am, if you could begin.
Hmm. Well, theater is about community. It's about a group of people coming together, breathing, responding, being in a space, sharing. And I do agree fully with Toral that some really exciting work is happening. The young groups that have come up, the risk taking, the challenges that they are posing themselves, the new languages that are evolving, is a very exciting time because all walls have dissolved.
Hmm.
Anything is possible. The potential has become limitless.
Hmm.
There is no such thing as a way of working. It's
Hmm.
it's such a it's such a it's like multiple ways of looking at the same thing. What Brecht would call complex seeing. And I
Hmm.
think even though Salim felt that the NST had reached a certain point of full stop, I do not agree at all
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
teach there regularly and I find that every year the students are getting better and better, which means that
Hmm.
they're coming from a situation where the exposure has been of a certain kind, which has
Sure.
made it possible for them to dissolve what is meant by realism, what is meant by naturalism, what is meant by alienation. I mean, all these have become very outdated terms. To say
Hmm.
the think out of the box or experimental or avant-garde, they're completely outdated terms. So the fresh references or non-references are really emerging from a lot of the interesting work that has happened at the NSD, which is then filtered out and percolated. Or uh, I'm not saying that it's only from there. People have people have an ex- people know that anything is possible because
Right.
the theater space is not a space where the audience is only seeing you front in a frontal manner. You can keep on shifting your seat and seeing it from like a kaleidoscope, changing, dissolving, taking new shapes and forms. And I think in a certain way the NST is doing conventional work. You'll have a you will have a Kuriyatam class and a Kathakali class. You will also have a director coming from Uzbekistan and doing something completely wacko. So all those exposures, all those multiple exposures, give us the student the choice to
Huh.
decide in which direction he or she wants to go. It's all about curiosity, wonderment, and openness. And I
Wow.
think that any institution, any space must provide those possibilities. Even within the work that I do, it's collaborative.
Hmm.
It's the word director does seem to have a resonance of authority, but you try to create a collaboration, a collective, a non-hierarchical space, which is what a lot of the younger people are doing. And hence the work that is emerging may not be fully formed, but they are moving towards a language which is
Hmm.
more egalitarian, which is really thinking not in what you call they're breaking the rules. They're taking risks. They're jumping off the cliff.
Right. Right.
So,
Wow.
yes, in a certain way, I mean, my generation is really a refugee of technology. For me, the digital world is not very accessible. But maybe this time has given me an idea of how to put on Zoom, little simple
Hmm.
things like that. So yeah, it's like my play, The Black Box, really got its cue from Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was a
Right.
time of wonderment, a time of distress. So it works with contradictions. So this is the space we are in. We're full of contradiction. The other thing I would say is that when I work on a play, I work on a language of performance also. So
Hmm.
I can't say that I can get an actor from here there. I need actors who will work with me for 3 months because it's a journey we all take together in terms of performance language, in terms of language that the body has with space, with objects, with the hundred of nods that construct a scene or deconstruct a scene. So the system is different. The economics for that system have to be different. And yet I work in a regional vernacular local space where the I have no access to corporate funding because we do not have that kind of we do not have businesses in or that kind of love for the arts. We don't have the whole history of Punjabi theatre, but it's basically been activism. It's basically been street theatre. It's basically been a theatre which is like a pulpit, evangelical message uh, sharing, which is also a very integral part of what theatre um, the agitprop theatre. But that's not the kind of work I do. So I have created so many limitations in terms of the way I work that I have access to nothing but my own imagination, my own space, and the actors I work with.
Wow. Wow. That took me some time. Thank you, ma'am. Vinay, sir? You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, no, I really, I mean, it's amazing to hear what Neelam ji said, of course, because that is an experience in any case which all of us will, I think, identify with. Those of us who have been around for a few decades and who've been trying to forge our own way ahead in our, trying to find our own ways of working with actors. And it's a different space. It's difficult to be in. It's laudable, of course. But I think if I may just jump a bit, jump a little further ahead. Uh, Whenever we've had any conversations, I've been in any conversations of this sort, it normally does end up being about the past or the present, and perhaps a tentative step into the future. But I rarely find theater practitioners talking about 20 years into the future, 40 years into the future, 60 years down the line, when we are going to, be reincarnated, hopefully, or perhaps hopefully not. But I think it's vital for those of us who've been around for a long time, and also for those who are actually full of that energy which Neelamji was referring to, that passion that she was referring to find ways of connecting which are meaningful without being relevant only to that which we are doing at this moment. If Because what is the reason for a session of this sort, for instance, if it were not to take giant imaginative, theoretical, critical strides into the far future and not just the near future, where perhaps there is no NSD, where perhaps there is no theater the way that we know it. How do we prepare ourselves and the generations that are working with us for that? Of course, they will find their own way. We are not responsible for it. So I say this very selfishly. What if, in the dreadful eventuality that I'm alive and fit 30 years down the line and still doing theater, let me look at it very selfishly. What should I do now to exist then? I think it's a vital question in the context of professionalism, which
Right.
then will link itself with commercialism. And when we look at it there, in a bleak state of mind, I see dreadful scenarios. I see the prevalence and the proliferation of online theater to the extent that the live experience actually starts losing meaning gradually. We will not even know it but that loss of meaning will creep in the same way as a few years ago, for instance, going out for watching a film just fell off the grid because people got comfortable watching films on VHS. And I'm already talking a long time ago. And suddenly we are back in a situation which has been sort of accelerated by the pandemic, where we are so happy watching everything on our devices. We were forced to do it. Now we are used to it. Slowly we are becoming happy with it. And there are commercial theaters which are beginning to close down. There are films made by reputed filmmakers which are releasing at the theaters and are already making a loss in the last month. The second risk that I see is that if online theater, I'm just giving examples, I'm not trying to paint dreadful scenarios, I'm merely trying to say that we need to think ahead and discuss now, because it might lead us to those few, decisions or innovations, which in fact, to use that term which Neelamji said is no longer relevant, but I differ. I think it is. Those steps which are of the avant-garde, which are made by those people and those thoughts that we are sending ahead into the future to try and espy what is the likely scenario going to be. And it may not be that. It may be different. It may be left or right of what we are thinking. But it's important to think about it. So the second danger that I see is that if suppose theater becomes a live performance and side by side, it exists on OTT platforms the same way as films do, perhaps dedicated theater OTT platforms. Yes? What if it goes the way that music has gone, the way that the streaming industry has taken over music, where artists, in fact, are being done out of their dues, where the system that is prevalent right now is that all the artists get only their market share of the entire revenue which is earned via streaming, whereas the company itself keeps the major share of the profit. That, in fact, seems to be a scenario which would be worse than the commercial or stroke professional scenario that it exists. So there's just a few things I'm throwing onto the table. I think
Sure.
it's vital that we start, in sessions like this, actually going beyond the past and the present and seeing, okay, so what is it that we can do? And one vital way to do that, I'm just saying the last thing that I'll probably say on this session, because I don't know how much time we have, is that talking about community and talking about the help and talking about commercialization and going hand in hand. I think if there was one decision that groups of like-minded theater people could take, which would perhaps be the best help possible to any and everybody doing the theater, it would be to share databases, to share audiences, to go the open source route, where all that information that we have, which can be put on common platforms in an open source fashion, easily accessible by any and every theater group in the country, in any region of the country. Now, that's the kind of initiative that we need if we are talking about professionalization. And that kind of initiative is not going to come from NSD or SNA. I've spoken to sorry, I should not say politically incorrect things on this forum, but I mean, I've been speaking about it for the last 3 decades, and yes, it already exists is the answer that I've got. But for God's sake, there is not even one lucid place where you can access, which you can access on the net, which tells you these are all the theater festivals that exist from the northmost portion of the country to the southernmost portion of the country. This is when you should apply. This is what they are looking for. It's appalling.
Right. Right.
So I'm saying that for all of us who have this information with us, for all of us who have an audience database, today I know that we tell people, if you're coming to Calcutta, our database is yours.
Hmm.
And if this can actually be coordinated by a few of us who are like minded on a pan Indian basis, so that it's easy for us to walk out of our regions, our cities, and walk into the next district or the next city or the next state and actually not feel, yeah, where is the audience going to come from? If we can
Right.
actually do it, it's revolutionary. We will not have to pay for TOI in Mumbai when we are performing at Prithvi. We will not have to bring out ads in Mumbai Theatre Guide. We will not. I mean, it could be revolutionary because we are ensured that the money that we are spending on going there is coming back, and our ad spend, which forms a large part, large component of the budget, is done away with.
Right.
That's all. I mean, if we
Right.
could take this
Right.
forward.
Sure, sure. So I'm taking this forward to, in fact, Toral, before that, since Salim Arif sir got disconnected. So this was my last question on which Neelam ma'am and Vinay sir have already
Yeah.
shared the views on is that what is my responsibility as an artist towards colleagues and the audience, henceforth. And very aptly added by Vinay sir is that it should not be about past or present anymore, but it should be about future, 20 years, 30 years down the lane. And
True.
but just before that, I would like to reach out to Toral and put the same question to you, Toral. What should we do that so the, and where do we so that we reach at a place that we aspire for 30 years down the lane?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't particularly feel qualified to be giving advice on this. Um, but I think, as a member of the community, okay, so there is another point which somehow we never got around to making, which I would just like to touch upon very quickly, is that we have spoken a lot about professionalism when it comes to actors and directors, etc. But there is another whole set of designers and technicians and stage managers and producers, uh, which I mean, today, somebody an actor who graduates from an acting school is a trained actor, but in order for the professionalism to come uh, across the board, like there is a lot more training in all aspects of theater, which I think is something that the future can definitely look at working on. So because for anybody who is, say, even a lighting designer, and I'm sure all of you here will have witnessed this, that they've learned on the job. Like it will take you like 7-8 hours of assisting another designer, making the mistakes, coming to a point where you can even be confident
Right.
about designing and running a show. So there is, I think, training is a huge investment that needs to be made in the future, like going into the future, I would say, for sure. um, and the other thing is that as a community, I think it is our responsibility that we should not lose anyone who has the passion for the art form, right? If we meet somebody or know somebody who's passionate about theater, wants to explore whatever aspect of it is, as a community, we need to be there for these individuals. We shouldn't lose them, to a job in Vodafone or in a bank or elsewhere. Um, and I think that again is an investment in human beings. But I think that is something that we can easily do, is to keep building this community, not lose the people who want to be part of it, support them. And what Vinayji said is right. I mean, having this kind of an aggregator or a database would allow somebody who's new to have access to this information, right? You don't have to be in the in the business for like 5 years to even learn about these things. You go there and you know it. Your growth can begin from the first year. You don't have to slog for 10 years before you can even start growing as an artist.
Right.
So I think it is going to have to be a combination of like all these efforts,
Right.
because the interest is there. The emerging artists are young, they are hungry, they want to do things. um, and I think if we can just give them that boost, I think the next 30 years, Vinay ji, I'm very confident, will be very, very good, and you'll be amazed at the kind of work that can happen in both the fields, online and on ground. So
More power to you.
fingers crossed, yeah.
So that also brings to me the when Vinay spoke about and Toral advanced that about the database or repository, if we call it, something of that sort uh, is something which a person like me would require the most. When I say a person like me, a person who is interested in theater, who's been doing theater without any formal training per se. Like if you're from NSD or BNA, you have some sort of an access to a library or something. I for that for all the years that I've been doing, it's my exploration that has led me to know the playwrights that I know. Otherwise, for the first 5 years at least, the only playwrights that I have been knowing, because I've been majorly working in Hindi theatre, are the big four. And to top that, probably Dharmveer Bharti and Sarveshwar Dayal Saxena and so on and so forth. Probably four more, probably 10. So I've always been looking for playwrights who have been writing plays for our era, for the modern era, for the contemporary era. And I had there's a theater practitioner called Vivek Madan from Bangalore who with whom I had an interaction. He's also closely works with Toral and QTP. Uh, and he's been working on this. He's been working on this repository, a database of scripts, irrespective of the language, which is such a big deal for people like me. Uh, and probably this is just a start, a very small start, but very valid. And how it kind of a repercussion is created, and how it leads to the betterment of theater and the artist overall, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years down the lane. Thank you so much for the pointers there, with Vinay and Toral. Salim sir, we would like to end with with your views on on the question that I asked on the responsibility as an artist, my responsibility as an artist, that I should inculcate in my practice, towards colleagues and the audience, so that I will not be able to change anything, but so that probably the change happens automatically for better.
You see, I think most of us do that, and it is as it is now. We are in the last 10, 15 years of theatre work, so to say, at this age. I don't know how long we'll go, but the fact is that there is a younger generation, as Toral was saying, and it's very evident. You must come and watch the energy at Prithvi during the week when Tesco is happening to really feel energized and feel confident that yes, theatre is in safe hands. So that, of course, goes without saying. And but we, I think, collectively as database sharing, all those ideas are wonderful. We should work for that. But also, I think personally, I'm again saying the same thing. Always. We are not working on infrastructure. These small spaces, Harkat, Padatik, end of the day, they are functional spaces where you experiment and do experimental work. But how will it consolidate into a movement of collective activity where you can have a larger group of plays? For instance, the big plays. Now, when we had the big proscenium theaters, there were plays written for a larger cast. But due to other constraints, now we have four-actor plays. Now it has reduced to monologues. So there is a certain impact which is happening on the content also because of this limitation of spaces, which I think is the crunch. So there has to be a collective fight for newer spaces with latest technology, because if we want to really do something substantial, when I say substantial, I'm saying in terms of creating a movement which was there in the 70s. It got created because everything got together. 15 years of continuous professional practice from various sources, and not even NSD, from people outside, non-NSDites who were working in, say, non-formal training methods. Those groups, Dishantas and others, Rangayan movement in Maharashtra, all these movements, or Benaka movement in your Karnataka, Bangalore, Samudaya movement. Now, those movements were created out of a certain synergy which happened collectively. I think this is the time to have that kind of a upsurge and not get reduced to individual smaller spaces. Because Aram Nagar has about 15 spaces now. And they are doing all monologues, 10, 20, 30, 40 people watching and sit. But does it really help the cause of theatre in the larger context? That is the question we have to address. So I would say all that is fine. I'm not being cynical, I'm being very positive. But the fact remains that unless we improve our infrastructure, our theatre will remain the way it is in terms of act. Because आपने देखा ही नहीं है अच्छा ऑडिटोरियम, तो आप उसमें कंसीव कैसे करेंगे सर? If you do not know.
Yes, yes.
Our problem, I'll tell you, from Prithvi to NCP, I have to design a set which Prithvi can take as well as Bhava can take. Now, how do I reconcile these two spaces in my play?
Right, right.
And if I have to travel to Lucknow and Banaras and to Patna to have those spaces with 24 lights, with 40 lights, from 180 lights you come to 20 and 24 and 40 lights. Now, what are we looking at? We are not looking at, we are just managing. I'm saying this managing theatre scenario needs to change at some point of time. When I started, it was the same, but there was so much of collective energy, which now I find in a very different context in Mumbai. Because
Right.
Mumbai has a theatre fraternity, which is meeting practically on a daily basis. And when Prithvi, because of being an adda, where we all, as in when required, meet. But there is a kind of exchange of ideas in Mumbai, which benefits all of us.
Right.
Rest, we can do that on an all India level. But for God's sake, let's not find solace in that we have managed here, we have managed it. I think we shortchange ourselves. That's all I'll
I
say.
mean,
Thank you.
definitely, yeah, thank you. But I would just like to conclude by saying, while we would also love not like to, restrict ourselves or give solace ourselves in a place, but the movement that you've been talking about, sir, I personally have seen this sort of a movement in not in the physical infrastructure, but definitely the creative infrastructure, and that's
It
one of
was
the reasons.
always there. You
Yes,
see, it was always there. I started in 70s as a student of university, going to work in a group which was so-called amateur group, but directed by people like Pankaj Kapoor, Ranjit Kapoor, NSD trained graduates coming and working with smaller groups in Lucknow, Kanpur, Bansi Kaul. Now, all these people created a certain sense of discipline and professionalism in people like us and inspired us to take professional theatre. I'm saying
absolutely.
this kind of transmission has stopped in the last
Right.
30 years. And वो NSD extension workshop करती है वो अलग बात है. But
हाँ,
all I am trying to say is that the kind of Samudaya, Binaka, Rangayan, Deshantar, Meghdut, Darpan, these groups that hold 400, 500 theatre workers in a city like Lucknow in 70 was a huge thing.
right.
I'm saying 3 months of booking in Ravindralaya for space. So look at the
Right.
quantity and quality of work which was happening.
Right.
Now there is work happening, but those spaces are not there, and these harkats and padathiks, इनकी अपनी limitation है as a space, because A, the content, B, the economy. And these two things are needed the most
And also the
today.
situation, also, I mean, the prevailing situations also do not lead us to do that. What I was intending to say is, uh, I've been a witness of black box. I've been a witness of every brilliant thing, and uh, for me, the movement kind of created there itself in terms of the work, because we have only so much of limitations. We have only so much of access. We cannot. Not everyone can have a prithvi, or not everyone can have access to the energy, and that is where in their own small spaces like Adi Shakti also, for example, if they are known now, they are known for creating brilliance in their own way, in their own structure. And that, probably, I feel, or would like your all your opinions as your last opinion, is an unseen, और बिना ध्वज का एक कह सकते हैं एक movement है, where you're coming out of the proscenium, because now proscenium in fact has kind of become a limitation, and we're coming out of it. And you yourselves have been the prime examples of that. Even Kharashmi, for that matter, is
But let me tell you, I'm sorry to cut you short,
yes,
but the
yes,
fact remains that the ensemble quality of theatre,
right,
what theatre meant.
right,
Now you have 6 monologues coming in one show. Assembly of monologues is a show at Prithvi.
yeah,
Now, is that what we are reducing, becoming from an ensemble group work to an individualistic experimental work? Is it a personal medium? It may be, but the
right,
collective ensemble quality of theatre, which was the essence of theatre.
correct. Vinay sir,
So
Vinay sir,
I'm saying, please, I'm not
yes,
against what is happening. Please, I'm not.
absolutely,
But I'm saying somewhere our minds are getting now, as Vinayji was saying in the other context, that we are getting comfortable with the digital space, and we are very happy watching films on our Netflix screens at home, and we are not going inside the theatre. I'm talking of that creation of that mindset. That mindset is impacting content. Please understand this, because I watch a lot of work which is happening.
true,
I do watch
true,
other directors' work. It
right,
is getting seriously marginalized in terms of individual experiments.
right, right,
That's why you do not have a great script coming out in the last so many years. That's why you do not have a great collective performance coming out in the country. Ratan Da ka ek ho jata hai, kisi aur ka aa jata hai. But we are not. Look at our history for the last 10 years. Count the number of plays which you can single out as good production. You see, I'm not saying, but I'm saying we are losing out on a very good tradition we had.
of course, of course, of course,
That is what I'm coming from there. That's all.
yes,
I'm
yes,
all for experimental. I'm all for future, but the future needs to take every good thing which we had.
in the past, yes, absolutely.
We should.
Yes,
So I'm saying the ensemble quality, the collective
hmm,
synergy of a group coming together and working.
right,
Now,
yes,
3 months, as Neelamji was saying, you evolve a language over a period of time. But
right,
if Neelamji wants to do a kitchen gatha, a play of that scale, if she wants to do a huge production which involves 40 people, now she'll need a bigger space.
right. So
And
on
she'll
the,
have, I'm saying so, the sheer fact that I'm thinking of a small individualistic one man, because I see it at Mumbai, na, they assemble 6 monologues and call it a show. One on one is a form in Bombay. Now, is that what we have improved from a collective experience to an individualistic expression wala experience?
certainly
Is
not.
that what we have achieved in the last 30 years in terms of growth? I'm questioning that. I'm not.
Yeah,
So that somewhere this experimentation of this new space is
hmm,
making all of us very, very individualistic in theatre.
correct, correct.
That is what my problem.
Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
sir. Vinay, sir. Yes.
I just like to, I completely agree with what Salimji has said. And yes, theater has to be about the ensemble, experience. But where I disagree, and not because I disagree with the thrust of what he's saying, I'm merely trying to put factual things in context. That, for instance, in Calcutta, again, I'm speaking from my experience, as Salimji is speaking from the Bombay experience, largely in terms of the creative energy that exists there. I can refer to two spaces which are apparently intimate spaces in Calcutta. One is the Padatik space, the other is the Rangkarmi space, which Usha ji finally inaugurated a few years ago. Uh, in both spaces, ensemble productions have not been restricted. In fact, just a year and a half ago, I did the Inspector General in Hindi with 17 people in that same space. It is an intimate space, but we need to reach our, conclusions about intimate spaces also on the basis of actual parameters of each space. It is an intimate space, but the width happens to be 35 feet, which in fact is far more than many proscenium spaces afford you. Just as a point. So, the limitation which does exist in intimate spaces is that of the number of audiences which can see your work. That is the main limitation. At Rangkarmi also, Ushaji's theatre, we all know, consists of a hell of a large team, and she has been doing that successfully at her own space as well as in outside spaces. And
Right.
apart from that, what does happen is when we make our transfer from these small intimate spaces to larger spaces wherever we get the opportunity to perform, in fact, it's far easier for us to modify. In terms of set designs, yes, you have to use your ingenuity to try and accommodate it to a smaller space or an intimate space. But again, I'd like to point out just last year, Faisal, in fact, got an entire drawing room set into Padatik, and I have no idea how the hell he managed to fit it into that space, but he used his ingenuity in a 8 member production to put an entire drawing room, perfectly realistic set in that space, and it did not. ऐसा नहीं है कि वो बात अखर रही थी. The audience accepted it. It did work. So I'm saying, in the absence of larger spaces, smaller spaces, unless they are infrastructurally, technically challenged,
Hmm.
they provide a good enough opportunity for ensemble work and for the carrying on of the tradition, which in fact has existed since before the
Correct.
70s. And that has actually been carrying on, I presume, in other cities also to some extent, as it has in at least two spaces in Calcutta. I just wanted to
That's what I was
make
referring
that.
to. That's what I was also referring to.
Hmm.
Yes, I mean this. We It's been like 1 hour 50 minutes of what 1 hour we thought of. We would have to really cut it short here. While I would like you to speak, unless any one of you, Neelam ma'am, do you have any final words before we call it a wrap?
Um, I've always worked with the ensemble group, 12 musicians, 14 people on the stage. Um, but as they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions. Nowadays, it is impossible, given the conditions, for one to really work with too many people, or even desirous to work with too many people. So I myself did a monologue, which has been filmed and is being screened presently. Um, um, and for me, it was very difficult because I was so used to music. Music is such a because I worked with B.V. Karant for almost 25 years. So working with him, music became an integral part of whatever work I did. And I do have a group of 12 musicians, 10 musicians who I work with. So for me, while doing the play, I kept on saying, yeah, when things open up, we can put a little music. Because I also think of the emotional structure and the physical structure and the dramatic structure of my play with music as a very important uh, underlayering or overlaying. But then, of course, I couldn't do that. So for me to work with one actor with no technical help, just four lights which I'd stuck on a brick uh, wall was all
Yes.
that I had. So it was a new challenge for me to work with one actor, no technical staff, no infrastructure. So I think each situation teaches you new necessities. Now, when I do a production with the NST, with the repertory or with the third year students, then it's like luxury. You have a stenographer, you have a light director, you have an assistant, you have somebody who comes and brings you tea. While when I do it with my own group, even if it's with the ensemble cast, I still can't afford anything beyond the fact that I pay the actors. So I become the provider of food, the costume designer. With Karanji not there, I become the music director, I become the scenographer, I become the one who structures the set. So I think I think it is interesting and exciting because in this way you're exploring other dimensions of your own creative. Limitations are wonderful because limitations, physical limitations, say let's push that something known as imagination, which is the catalyst for all that you do and all that you experience. Uh, as an alternative world that you create on the stage and within yourself during the whole process, that fructifies in front of you. So
Right.
I don't think I have any. I think we can't say that this is theater and this is not theater. What is theater? What isn't theater? Everything that works for you and works for the people who are seeing it is fine by me. It should be celebrated. It should be saluted. It should be lauded because we all know how difficult it is to remain in this profession. And there is no such thing known as a particular kind of theater. Like in the visual arts or like in any other art, each person is functioning as an individual with its own individual way of looking at narratives, at stories, at objects, at space. There is no such thing as me being a Punjabi theatre director or
True.
being a Marathi theatre director because we're
Mm.
all working in our own particular way. So it is an individual space that we occupy. And I will end my um, relationship at this moment with the session on professionalism by saying that, as Henry Miller says, that when you write or when you create, you wear the robe of a priest. It's private, it's personal, it's completely isolated.
Well, wow. Thank you, ma'am. I think there can't be
Thank
a better ending to this. Thank you so much, everybody, all of you, for your valuable time. There's so much of learning personally to me. Uh, we,
you.
I'm at loss of words. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye bye.
you.
Meeting all of you.
Yes, it's great to
It was
see
lovely
Neelam
meeting all of
ji,
you.
Vinay ji, Toral.
Thank you. What a
Likewise.
After a
lovely
long
morning.
time, we got to share a
Yeah.
platform together.
It was lovely. It was really
Yeah.
nice.
Thank you.
Thank
Lovely
you.
interacting with all of
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Neelam.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much, everybody.